Come on. Streamworks. Catch. Oh. So Stream can hear a bit of the discussion. The lapel mic is not the most expensive part of that. Come on. Okay, so what? Yeah, just press the power button for a little bit. Let's see. Why is that?
If I'm done, I'm done.
There you go.
I'm done.
If Links wants to show something, and that
Okay.
works.
Okay.
All right. So basically, we look at the main three there, right? And then RPG Maker we brought up, uh, Game Maker. Obviously, there's like Frostbite, but I feel like probably not worth looking at for the most part for most newbies.
You're at a studio.
Yeah. And what about CryEngine? Same thing? Same thing?
Like some of it is if you're working for a group, it's like this is our engine. We did it ourselves. We have a guy that does that, and this is the engine that you're going to learn and use and do whatever. It's just the same as any other big general massive software firm, right? You don't get to always pick what you want.
Yeah. So with that in mind, when it comes to game engines, when it comes to gaming or game development in general, do you think there's like a better way to start? Do you want to pick a game engine and learn that, or do you want to learn like the fundamentals of coding, then go to a game engine? That way you can adapt based off the different ones that studios are using.
Question.
Hmm.
I think it depends on what your goal is. If you want to be more of a game designer, then you can certainly start with a game engine. If you want to be a game developer, like really be in the weeds and really understand like how does this stuff work and how do I optimize this? How do I ensure that things running smoothly? Learning programming first makes by far the most sense. Have those fundamentals sort of sticking to a game engine.
Makes sense. So fundamentals if you want to get in the weeds, or if you want to do more game design stuff, pick a code engine and go.
Makes sense.
So sort of like learn coding if you want to go to like one of the AAA studios and be working 9 to 5 doing one specific little like.
Wait, you said 9 to 5?
Okay, sorry. What is it? 9 to 9? Okay, 9 to 9.
7 days.
Modeling one guy's chin hairs.
You wouldn't be doing that as like if you're going to weeds to programming, right? Like you're going to be in charge of somebody's going to hand you a design doc, right? Which might just be a PowerPoint or something, and they're going to say, okay, you need to code this, and you're going to go talk to like the one person on the team who knows what the system actually looks like and what different classes do. And you're going to slowly pick up, okay, what's this sort of like ball of spaghetti code that
Yeah.
they've written over the like X amount of time they've been built so far. And then once you get something working, you do it again and again and again. And then at some point you swap over from developing new stuff into bug fixing.
Yeah.
That's like easily half the development time to squashing bugs.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. And with that sort of logic there, I don't know where I was going. Never mind. Ignore that. But literally half
Yeah.
your time bug
It's,
fixing, half your time
I
learning
mean,
spaghetti
this
code.
is at the end of the day, big giant AAA game development is still a software engineering project. It still meets with all the same sort of systems of it, but then you're adding on to that whole software side, the artistic side.
Mm.
The I want to create this world. And so you're dealing with a whole bunch of additional issues of, hey, I just fixed this bug, but it's going to cause these other things over here, and then how's that going to affect balance in the game, and how's that going to affect the way that they go through the storyline, and how's that going to affect the vision of the director. So it's almost like adding a bunch of really really opinionated angry clients in the office next door that can just come over and like bother you because it doesn't meet with their artistic vision. So this is the big difference between there. It's so multidisciplinary. But a lot of like the programming side. And indie development, now you get rid of that huge giant office with all those people that are going to, tell you what to do, and then you have to make those decisions yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense. So, just trying to figure out the food order here. It's a bit silly. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Is it as like I can't remember where I heard it, but it was like a meme in the game development scene where it's like literally like indie studios you get to sort of like work on the project from start to finish sort of thing, whereas like with these AAA studios you're literally just doing like the one really niche specific part for like a month at a time.
Yeah, I mean, different studios are different setups, right? And different studios work at games at different scales. So if it's a smaller game, right? Like if you're at a AAA studio, but you're like working on a mobile game, something like that, you might get to touch every part of it as a sort of programmer, game developer, if you're getting to go to like you're going where you're needed, right? You hit different speeds. But when you're at like this massive thing, like Ubisoft, thinking like Bethesda, et cetera, right? The scale of these games means that you have to segment,
Mhm.
right? In that individual team, there's like massive hierarchies saying like, okay, this team owns this area or this like component of the game, right? And they can liaise at like the program manager level with other people at other teams, but like you don't go outside of that scope. And sometimes because of production reason, you'll like get traded back and forth between teams. You'll have to like learn a new system, whatever. But that's sort of that scale. So you kind of have to make the game advance.
And you might also be, when we're talking about this, we're kind of talking about as if there's only one game.
Mhm.
This company could be running, you know, three or four different developments at different
Yep.
stages, where if you're in one of those things, okay, you're bug testing this one game, but you're also starting the next round of development on this other. So if you look at, for example, if there's a Call of Duty that has to come out every single year, right? The one is going to be in early stage release, and hey, we've got a whole bunch of multiplayer bugs on the Xbox store. But then conversely, you're also building the new multiplayer and the new setups for whatever's in production presently that's not going to see store shelves for, you know, two Christmases down the line.
So no, and the funny thing about the like sort of hopping around thing is, I imagine it's probably like the Baldur's Gate devs where they had to like their development process was actually hooped because they had to keep sending people out for all these award shows. It was actually like an ongoing issue at that studio apparently, where it's just like they couldn't get anything done because they
Yeah,
had to
I
send
saw
stuff
that
for
article. You know,
awards.
it's so sad that we have to go to all these
Oh
award shows.
shucks,
Oh shucks. We can't get any of our work done because we're too busy going, you know, and accepting awards
so funny.
for our work. I,
Fair enough. As far as like so
that's what we call
a
a
humble
humble
brag, yeah.
flex there.
So there's the three-man engines. There's a couple more alternative ones. There's Roblox. I don't know if Epic's still doing it, but they were planning on releasing the ability to make games in the Fortnite engine.
I'm sure they'd love to do that eventually. Everybody wants to be road games.
Yeah, because they had that. They literally at GDC 2 years ago, one of the things they were showing off was somebody made Call of Duty, like literally the Call of Duty map where it's like the middle is like that big mechanical structure, and people used to like do knife fights on it where you'd run around in like the desert one, that like classic one. Someone made that in Fortnite, and they were playing Fortnite Call of Duty,
Well,
right? So
like
it's like,
mods and things like that are where a lot of early developers got their start, was actually taking existing games and creating new level packs or full, you know, conversion mods. So taking these game engines and then using them for other purposes. I know that there was one in which they took it was like StarCraft and turned it into like a first person shooter or something within the same sort of system. But look at half um Half-Life. See, Counter-Strike, originally a mod. It
mhm.
was originally a Half-Life mod that they took. Portal was a school project where they had used one of the source engines and then did that. And Team Fortress was a mod originally. It was a mod off of actually Quake, if I'm not mistaken.
Dota was a mod off of Craft 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dota.
Sorry? The guy that modded well, free, basically free, as a reader.
That's what he's saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they would take these existing developments and convert them and hot rod them.
So with all of the options out there, what do we think is like realistically the best place to start? Because like we went over what's there. What do we think? Should we start with Roblox? Should we? Is that a good like way to learn best practices? Should you start with Unity because they've got such like there are so many tutorials out there, or maybe just like Godot because like it's so like beginner friendly, right?
I don't think there's a wrong answer. I'd suggest to students to learn Godot or Unity first. I think that both of them fit in the middle of what we can think of as a spectrum between sort of like uh, super high definition industry kind of things and sort of super low definition casual game creation in a way that with Unity or Godot, you can do a lot, right? Once you learn the other one. I think that Unity is slightly broader, is slightly more general in terms of the things you can do with it than Godot is right now, but who knows, that could change. Um, I think that a lot of people want to just jump into Unreal. I think that's not really worth it unless you're like going to go work at a company that's using Unreal, or you're planning on really souping up a massive indie team out of nowhere.
Mhm.
Good luck with that. And then on the other side, right, I think there's a lot of these smaller things like Scratch or Roblox or Sony's Dreams or etc.
Project Spark,
projects are resting.
RIP. I like Project Spark. It's cool.
I would say part of it too is just to start with something too, right? Like there's so many people that are overwhelmed by trying to decide what's right that they don't look at what's okay. So somebody's making a game in Roblox, they're still doing games design, they're still thinking about how these things work together, they're still thinking about that. Can they take that and then move it up? Sure. But again, like I would say, just try to make like even if you're making a board game or something because you don't have the technology to do what you want to do right now, the whole act of going through that, right? It's just practice. It's time on keyboard or time in the lab or time to it, and that's what gets you the experience.
That makes sense. Um, as far as like learning a game engine goes, obviously tutorial hell is kind of a thing. Like it's one of those things that like in the internet discourse I hear about it a lot where they're like, yeah, I tried to learn game development through this tutorial, this tutorial, this tutorial, but as soon as I'm done with my tutorials, I don't seem to have an original thought.
Yeah.
Like I don't know where to go from there on
Yeah,
anything.
I think they got it backwards because they're trying to learn how to do something, but they don't have an idea of why do they want to know how to do it. And I think from a pedagogical perspective, it's a lot better to have at least a semblance of I want to make a card game like Magic and play it, or I want to make a first person shooter. And then you kind of naturally come to those points of, huh, how do I go about making this piece? And then you look at the tutorial that helps you with that, and you learn that new element. And then you go, well, how do I do this other thing? And start building from there. Because then you have the motivation of an end product in mind rather than it being, I'm just going to do all these tutorials, and this one tells me how I can make cards work, and this one tells me how I can make first person shooter, and this one tells me how to make so there's people that just go through every single tutorial to make all these different types of games. And then, as you said, right, they hit that wall of, well, what did I want to make to begin with?
Hmm.
It's now you're kind of at level one in this whole different bridge of skill sets rather than moving up a skill tree, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if you have an idea of, okay, I want to spec into something is maybe how I can put this into a gaming context, right? Like pick what you want to, what you're out 20 levels down the road, what's your spec? Okay, great. Now go back and go through the tech tree that gets you to that spec.
So sort of start with where you want to go. But what if you're just trying to learn in general? Like what if you don't want to sort of have one goal? What if you just want to learn in general so you can participate in like game jams and stuff, right? Where do we think the
But
best way to
but
start that
but
is?
that to me is still a goal because you're still having to make a selection with a game jam of
Yeah.
what you want to build there. There's so many different game jams out there, right? That I think you're still you have to figure out what that goal is to have that motivation, or you will get stuck in tutorial hell.
Yeah, I think, to just restate the same thing you were saying with slightly different words, I think it makes the most sense to just basically take a series of small games
Mm.
in a game engine in order to learn.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't matter if those small games are clones, doesn't matter if those small games
So make your Flappy Birds.
Flappy Birds, make your, wandering around the scary spooky house, make your little shooters, etc., etc. or even just going ahead and saying like, I want to make this cool weird, and like just trying to make it as long as it's appropriately scoped for a first project, and you're not going to try to spend your next 10 years continually working on your very first project because you're going to learn faster than the game can possibly keep up with you, right? So you're just iterating through a bunch of little projects at this point.
I might have told this story last year, but one guy came up to me at a convention and he brought with him, it was two full binders with him, and he was like, I really want to make a game. It's gonna be like it was basically he's trying to do like a big giant D&D-esque video game, right? And I said, okay, great. Do you have any artists? No. Do you have any experience coding? No. Do you have any, this? But what he had done is he had spent the better part of, I'd say, 5 years only doing lore and backstory of a JJ, of this huge, like, Tolkien-esque universe, like Game of Thrones level, here's the house colors and the sigils and who like is married to whom and the back 5 generations of like all the intrigue and etc. and had that all written. And I was like, what you've done, sir, is you've created a book. Like you need to write a book. Like so it is kind of one of those things of like if you don't ever. And so I was like, you just got to go and like, make a small game and try it out and do whatever. But no, no, he had his huge binders and he was still adding lore and still doing that. That's what happens.
Start with your space.
Yeah.
Start small, don't work on your magnum opus from the beginning.
Correct.
Fair enough. So you're saying start making a clone, right?
That was a suggestion as a path.
Potentially, right? So start small, a couple little projects.
It's the advice is start small.
Start small.
If you don't have ideas of your own, make clones.
Sure.
Ideas that are cool little tweaks and existing things. We'll talk about some stuff, I guess, later today after we do anything.
Yeah.
Then start with that.
And if you are starting that way, like, how do you start in general, though? Like, how do you get to the cloning section, right? You have to know how to use the stuff to clone someone else's game, right?
Sure.
So, would you do tutorials for that? Or...
Generally for pieces, like there might be a tutorial where here's a specific this thing.
Okay, yeah.
But again, my suggestion is not it's clone if you have no other option.
No other option. Okay, fair enough.
But if you have the option to do something that's like, okay, I want to make a platformer but where you can't jump, something like that, right? Like a little fun twist on a jump. Then you can say, okay, well, let me follow some tutorial that will get me 50% of the way there, and then let me figure out the rest of this bit by bit.
So instead of jump king, you make dive fall.
I like Flappy Bird, but instead of just flapping birds, it's going to be able to drop bombs as it goes along. Right? So now you can take the Flappy Bird clone and go, okay, well now how do I get from that Flappy Bird clone to then add in, some weapons or something? And then you add in like some enemy units or something like that. Well, you're halfway now towards a new version of like a rail shooter where you also have to move your ship up and down by tapping on that, but you're also then, in a bullet hell.
Yeah, literally
Right?
bullet hell.
So there's ways that you can like take maybe 2, 3 little genre techniques, find a tutorial for how to do those things, and then combine them in a weird way, and then add in more.
Doesn't even need to be tutorials.
Yeah.
There are scripting references.
Yeah, docs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, go look at the docs. Say like, oh, I want this kind of thing to exist. What's the best way to do that? Seek advice from somebody who also knows, right? It's not just mashed together tutorials.
Yeah.
There's many different ways to gain this knowledge, but in trying to do this, you will gain something.
Yeah, I mean, even during Hamza's little presentation about Godot yesterday, he was like, "Oh God, what's the code for the collider?" You can pull up the docs and it literally tells you like
Yeah.
which function to call it. It's just the docs are
Yeah.
good, especially for Godot. Godot and Unity have great docs.
Well, Hamza's presentation was a great example too of the things that you start doing with the design, because as we were going through that, you and I from the audience were going, well, what if you want to do this? Well, what if you want to do? So we were having ideas of what the mechanics could be, or even the idea of he misplaced where he wanted to put that one platform. Well, now a platform goes this way.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that in a few different games where the platforms go on angles. Maybe that's a cool variation on it.
Makes sense. What else is relevant about game engines? Obviously, like we went over like so how skits started with them, the different ones that there are. Um, we've sort of generally went, don't try and avoid tutorial hell, but I feel like there's still value there. Where are like some of our favorite tutorials that we have used potentially? Because obviously, like, I'm a surprisingly a decent fan of GameDev.tv. It's a yeah, you get them through Humble Bundles. I'm cheap. Humble Bundles are cheap and they work. So like that's a pretty good one. Um, is there any sites like boot.dev or anything like that for game development? Like gamified learning of game development that anyone's sort of in? Anything like that? No? Ah, dang. Someone has to make that. $1 billion idea. There you go.
You-
There's so many for-profit, I'm going to teach you how to do game development things. I don't think someone needs to make that. There are
Oh,
plenty of them. The problem is that they're all garbage.
that's why you have to gamify it.
You're playing to make it more
Yeah.
garbage.
You think
It,
so?
Hotter garbage.
there's a lot of actual good stuff on YouTube, especially if you can find people that are doing like, hey, I'm going to create a clone of this game in, you know, a week. There was one I saw where he was like recreating like Club Penguin
Nice.
and going through and just trying to create some of those just to kind of see what the process is like and to do that. So there's some really creative people out there and that's YouTube, so it is free as much as
Yeah, I
YouTube is
mean,
free.
like as far as high quality ones go, obviously Bracky is really, really good, and he's
Mhm.
just did getting into Godot now, and then Game Maker's Toolkit. He did the Flappy Bird one that I kind of loosely referenced earlier.
Like with a lot of programming, it is just kind of like, hey, I want to make this thing. How do I get about it? Go check the docs, go watch a tutorial on this specific thing. But i- that I think is more valuable with the time on keyboard.
Yeah,
It's more of the hands-on doing. I think it's a lot more of like maybe the balancing and the mechanics. That's more of like the classroomy sort of things, anyways.
fair enough. So sort of get your fingers on keyboards. On that logic, though, obviously, like game jams, pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
Um, we'll talk more about them tomorrow about the different ones that are going on, but like literally right now, there's Pirate Software Game Jam. That's a decently large one. In next month is GMTK's Game Jam. This Friday is Kenny Jam. So there's like three big ones, big-ish ones coming up here. Like literally, Pirate has 15K, GMTK has 18, and Kenny's got three, right? So decent game jams that way coming up here.
Especially if you can do it in a small team, because if you've got somebody else there, it's also someone to bounce ideas off of and that has that knowledge that maybe you don't have. The game jams are all also nice, especially if they're in the same room, if it's a on-site one, because everybody in that is all trying to, there's very few that are very competitive,
Hmm.
and even if they are competitive, their teams are still very willing to give support, especially to new people coming into the industry and
Yeah,
people coming into those jams.
and I think we'll talk about it more tomorrow, but we might be trying to like push for the Kenny Jam, for example, for this weekend here. So people can start thinking about grouping up and maybe doing that. We'll have more information tomorrow about that. Um, so if you're wanting to like sort of start from scratch, learn an engine, make small projects, just trying to think of like how would you sort of upscale from those? Like, so you make a couple small projects. Would you try and take one of those and sort of make it a fully fruition game, or just pick something new?
Generally, you should not try to continue working on one of these initial projects because your skill level will have far exceeded the quality of code that you wrote. And so if you do that, I've seen this so many times, I'm sure Joseph does as well, students getting trapped in this loop of just continually redeveloping the same parts of their game over and over and over again, and never making any progress because they keep on getting better at doing it.
Oh, okay. So instead of
Terrible. Yeah.
So instead of getting in an Ouroboros loop of fixing your own code, sort of pull a roller dome where it's like you had a cool idea, and if you like that idea, just make a completely new game, sort of loosely based on it. Don't work on that one. Fair enough. Um, yeah, I don't know. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up as far as game engines go? Maybe like some extensions for game engines that they like?
Just questions people have.
Yeah,
It's mostly us three been speaking.
yeah, we're loud and vocal.
In the front.
And in the front for the mics.
Like,
Hello, Sotaris. Um, Bolt's funny. Bolt, it's Unity's visual scripting language. Don't use it. It's there though. Learn a language instead. We used it. We did a game jam in my first year of university before I had even learned any like coding language. Especially, it was just maybe Java at that point. So we built a game jam using Bolt. Weirdest experience I've ever had in my life. Drag and drop. Just what's it? Come ask questions. It's it's so strange. No, just learn a language. It's better. I think with that though, then that's probably good enough for now. We're
Any
mostly just test.
questions from online or
I think there's just one comment, and I don't know how old it is because I wasn't over here. I
okay?
was over in
Wait,
food.
what was the comment?
Oh my God, yes. Don't know when that came through. Don't know what the
Okay,
context was, but
okay. Well,
yes,
I'm glad it
Queen.
was positive. Whoever and whatever was said.
Well, we'll stop the stream now. I was mostly just testing to make sure that the stream worked and didn't crash on the encoder again. Uh, we will be back at 1 o'clock for the first lecture here. Good night.